Welcome to the lab, everybody. How are you today? Sorry for the reschedules and pushbacks. I do apologize for that. Thank you for being here. And we are back this evening with another episode, which is true crime related. We will look into the Rose Bly case a little more. I'll lay that out. I know that people have covered it, and it's a really interesting case. But I want to thank everybody for being here. I've made a little something for us to ponder together. Thank you so much, Cosmic Shy. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. But it is so good to be here, and it's good to see you. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. So let's just hop right into it and kill this music here. And the title of today is Pinocchio Knows, and obviously that's a double entendre, but the story of Pinocchio is obvious that, but it is Pinocchio's story has adapted and changed over time. The very original Pinocchio story is very sinister and dark, really, in nature, and had a lot more meaning, and it hits home a lot, but it's kind of an uncomfortable story as well. But I've read a little bit about it and talked about it, and it's something that's kind of very, I wouldn't say near and dear, but it's completely thought provoking, and it's something that I think about and have thought about for a long time, similar to the Of Mice and Men, the meaning behind these stories. There has to be meaning, especially how they have originated. Pinocchio knows that he's not supposed to be bad, but he does it anyway. He knows he's not supposed to lie, but he does it anyway. And he's not supposed to deceive, but he does it anyway. Now, is there more to that story? I would say yes. But let's go ahead and just take a listen here.
Pinocchio. When I was a boy, I was made distinctly uncomfortable by and even tried not to think about the Walt Disney movie Pinocchio. But in Carl Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio, serialized in 1881 to 1883, the original text from the Walt Disney adaptation Pinocchio, unlike Rousseau's ideal that the child is created naughty. In fact, he's badly behaved even before he's created. While still a stick of wood, he starts to fight between Geppetto and his owner. And once he is a marionette, he immediately wreaks all kinds of havoc. He insults Geppetto as soon as he has a mouth, laughs at him, runs away from him, etc. He behaves, in short, like a fairly typical 2-year-old when the 2-year-old is misbehaving. Collodi seems to have Rousseau in mind. When the wise 100-year-old cricket asks Pinocchio why he wants to run away from home, Pinocchio tells him, "I shall be sent to school and shall be made to study either by love or by force. To tell you in confidence, I have no wish to learn. It is much more amusing to run after butterflies or climb trees and to take birds out of their nests." Contra Rousseau, Collodi thinks that a young boy who does not undergo a traditional education will only get naughtier and will grow up to be a grown-up perfect donkey. As the cricket warns and prophesizes, Pinocchio does indeed later become a donkey. The first real lie in the story is not told by Pinocchio, who does, however, repeat various fanciful inaccuracies almost as soon as he can speak, but by Geppetto, who sells his coat in order to buy Pinocchio a school book and lies to the boy, telling him that he sold it because he found it too hot. And this is a classic example of a paternalistic lie told with good intentions, of which both a Buddhist and perhaps even Plato would have approved. Interestingly, Pinocchio understands what his maker has really done, and unable to restrain the impulse of his good heart, he sprang up and throwing his arms around Geppetto's neck, he began kissing him. And Pinocchio does have a good heart and a subtle enough intelligence to understand that though Geppetto has lied to Pinocchio, he has done it out of kindness. It's simply that Pinocchio likes to misbehave, and he hasn't learned the ways of the world yet. When the fox and the cat came along, he's easily led into temptation. Because Geppetto's lie is such a common one, before we continue Pinocchio's story, it is worth bringing to mind Dietrich Bonhoeffer's notion of living truth. Bonhoeffer argues that it is naive and misleading, perhaps even dangerous, to suppose that the literal truth always or even typically conveys what we mean when we talk about telling the truth. Of course, we often tell a straightforward lie and for morally blameworthy reasons, but we also make statements that are not literally true, that are in fact literal lies, while conveying a deeper truth that an honest statement of the facts could not communicate. So, for example, if Geppetto told Pinocchio, "I sold my coat in order to buy you a school book," he would be speaking the literal truth, but his meaning might be understood by Pinocchio as, "Look what sacrifices I make for you." By telling Pinocchio that he sold his coat because it was too hot, a lie, he communicates to Pinocchio something like, "My coat doesn't really matter to me and your school book does, and I don't want you to feel bad about the fact that I sold my coat." It's a very nice example of what Bonhoeffer means by living the truth. The more important meaning in communication that may not and sometimes cannot be conveyed by strict reportage. So many of the stories we tell our children are of this kind. Santa Claus is the obvious example, and we should ask ourselves as parents, and how many stories might my child or my boyfriend or my partner or my mom be telling me, not in order to mislead me, but to rather tell me something that, if said outright, might be understood or cause me harm. The first lie that is identified by Collodi as a lie, and the occasion for the growth of Pinocchio's already enormous nose, until after he had been tricked by the fox and the cat, and he learned that telling the truth, in this case about the gold, may get him into trouble. He's telling a fairy his story about how the cat and the fox stole one of his coins and how he fell into the hands of assassins when she asked him, "And the 4 pieces? Where have you put them?" "I have lost them," said Pinocchio, but he was telling a lie because he had them in his pocket. The series of lies Pinocchio tells is instructive. He tells the first lie because he's worried about losing his 3 remaining gold pieces. His second lie is told to back up his first lie. The fairy asks him where he lost his gold pieces, and he has to provide an explanation. You remember Walter Scott's familiar, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive." But the fairy is practicing the broken cookie jar style of interrogation. Itself inherently is deceptive because it feigns honest ignorance and curiosity in order to expose Pinocchio's lies. So, of course, knowing that he is lying to her and that he is likely to continue to lie, she pursues. "Pinocchio, if you've lost them in the woods near here, we will just go look for them and we will find them, because everything that is lost in the woods is always found." And it's at this point that Pinocchio loses all composure and tells a still clumsier lie. I didn't lose the 4 gold pieces. I swallowed them on accident while I was drinking your medicine. In a familiar, rarely effective technique of an argument, scrambling to extricate himself from the lies he is told, Pinocchio tries to put the blame back on the fairy. The fairy then allowed the puppet to cry and roar for a good half hour over his nose. This she did to give him a severe lesson and to correct him of the disgraceful fault of telling lies. The most disgraceful fault that a boy can have. And whether or not Calliope is tongue-in-cheek here is hard to say. The fairy is quick to forgive Pinocchio, and despite Pinocchio's historical reputation, the rest of the book is much less concerned with Pinocchio's lying than it is with other kinds of naughtiness he engages in. Pinocchio asks the fairy how she knew that he was lying. The fairy replies, "Lies, my dear boy, are found out immediately because there are 2 sorts. There are lies that have short legs and lies that have long noses. Your lie, as it happens, is one of those that have a long nose." And in Clancy Martin's piece in the New York Times, there was an interesting distinction that was made by the article. One worth remembering: lies that have short legs are those that carry you a little distance but cannot outrun the truth. The truthful consequences always catch up with someone who tells a lie with short legs. Lies that have long noses are those that are obvious to everyone except the person who told the lie. Lies that make the liar look ridiculous. In either case, according to our often deceitful fairy, lies are bad because they result in bad consequences for the liar. And this conclusion of the fairy is noteworthy because the vast majority of arguments against lying are made because lies are, so this line goes, unfair or harmful to the people who believe the liar. It can also be, as another Italian Machiavelli advises, that lies should be avoided because they produce negative consequences for the liar. When Pinocchio is transformed into a real boy by the fairy, it's not because he learned the value of honesty, but as the fairy says to him in his dreams, to reward you for your good heart. Boys who minister tenderly to their parents and assist them in their misery and infirmities are deserving of great praise and affection, even if they cannot be cited as examples of obedience and good behavior. And try to do better in the future and you will be happy. So it is really for his good intentions that he's rewarded, and Pinocchio's few lies and many misdeeds were, though consistently misguided, never malicious, and Pinocchio himself doesn't learn the lesson. Thinking about his life as a puppet, he said to himself with great complacency, how ridiculous I was when I was a puppet, and how glad I am that I have become a well-behaved little boy. Here we know Calliope's laughing at his character Pinocchio because he hasn't learned to be a well-behaved little boy. The fairy told him so. And his congratulating himself, not with the resolution to be a better boy, but with the great complacency of job well done. The lesson, if there is one, about trying to be one's best or to be a good boy, the story was serialized in a children's magazine and to please one's parents, basically. Before reading Calliope, when I was only familiar with Walt Disney's version of the story, I had the idea that the moral of Pinocchio's story was the truth sets you free. As long as you're lying, you are dancing on the strings of others. But once you are brave enough to speak your mind, rather than worry about what others would have you say and do, you can be authentic. You can be a real boy. I still think there is some merit to this view. And I imagine it must be part of what Disney had in mind. But the reason I prefer Calliope's original, much longer version of the story is that he appears to moralize, but in fact lets his hero behave very much as we expect a typical little boy will. Pinocchio is naughty. He lies. He breaks well-intentioned, sincerely meant promises. He gets into all sorts of difficulties through hastiness, inexperience, misjudgment, which sounds familiar to me. But he nevertheless is a hero in the end. He is good-hearted. He loves Geppetto. And the fairy nobly gives him just reward, which is, after all, to be an ordinary boy.
And there it was, written by Clancy Martin out of the New Yorker. It was some years back. I framed it kind of from that, and there's much more in depth. That article is much more in depth than that, but just a fantastic understanding of Pinocchio. Pinocchio, like I said, Pinocchio is a lot more sinister. Even later on, I believe he either kills the cricket or Geppetto, and then does himself some self harm. But is just something that really resonates. Some of these old stories have some of the best messages, and they go very, very deep. And I don't know anybody who has never found themselves in a terrible spot, or just for no reason getting put into situations that they shouldn't be put in, that they know that are wrong, yet they do it anyway. And it's a really tough thing to deal with. And if you learn anything from the Blue Fairy, is the forgiveness, as she was really pushing Pinocchio to tell the truth. But she wasn't pushing him. She was tricking him, because he wasn't a very good liar. He tried. He wasn't great at it. But it's just something that I found completely fascinating. And like I said, if you want to read the entire article, it's much longer than that, and it's in the description. It's something that such a interesting intertwined story. But something I wanted to share with you guys. And like I said, this was going to be a short live this afternoon. We'll be back with the Rosemary Bly tonight, I believe 6:30. So I hope to see you all back here. You guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you later. Appreciate it. Thank you.
There is no investigation. This boy has.
There is not, really? It is to me.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
But I have to put her on the side and where
I'm gonna do what I gotta do for me and my boys and my kids.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
There is no investigation. This boy
There
has.
is not, really? It is to me. Right. Idiot.
I've done my best. It's hard, that's real tough.
But I have to put her on the side and where with the boys.
I'm gonna do what I gotta do for me and my boys and my kids.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
Live from the NBD Production Studios, you're in the lab with your host, Joshua Diaz.
There is no investigation. This boy has.
There is not, really? It is to me. But I have to put her on the side and where with the boys. But I have to.
There is no investigation.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
But But I have to put her. But I have to put her on the side and worry about the boys